Jeremy Barker Plotkin, owner of Simple Gifts Farm, to talk about some hands-on experience with no-till farming. Welcome,
yes.
Jeremy.
Thanks, Kevin.
That's good.
So I'm Jeremy Barker Plotkin. I'm one of the two co-owners of Simple Gifts Farm, just up the road from Lake Warner in North Amherst. David Tepfer's the other co-owner there, and I'm not talking about it today, but Masood's presentation was very interesting, and we do rotational grazing of cattle and laying hens on our land on rotation ground. So I also have a friend that raises goats under solar panels, so I could talk about that a little bit as well. But I'm going to talk about our organic no-till. We've been transitioning the farm into a no-till system. We're doing it maybe not only, but partly as a response to climate disruption. So, as someone who works outside and is dependent on the weather, I can say that climate disruption is real, and it's happening already. It's happening now. A lot of you probably know and understand that, but some of the things that we hear, the projections, and we're already seeing this kind of thing, but it is projected to get worse. We're projected to have higher temperatures and precipitation, but also a lot less regularity. So periods of drought and periods of extreme storms, extreme wetness, which we're seeing this for sure. 2020 was a drought year. It was still dry well into spring 2021. And then we had the wettest July on record, which, if you guys haven't seen the numbers, our average annual rainfall is 40 inches. We had 12.7 inches in July. So it's not just a little wet. That's real wet, and it's been wet continuing August and into September. Not quite as extreme, but it's still wet. Organic farming is an answer to both adaptation to this climate disruption and mitigation of what's going on. There's been research out that says that organic farming systems are more resilient to these types of temperature and precipitation fluctuations, and are able to sequester carbon in the soil. And really, there's research out there that says this, but it shouldn't be a surprise, because the fertility in an organic system is based on soil health, and soil health in a lot of ways is equivalent to soil carbon. So organic farmers are very focused on building their soil carbon. So that soil carbon or organic matter in the soil can act as a sponge. It absorbs more moisture when it's wet and releases it when it's dry. So we've been growing organically in North Amherst for 15 years. We've always done rotational grazing on our rotation land, the land that's not in vegetables, which is a way of kind of pumping carbon into the soil. And we've started doing even more now with trying to transition into no-till. So no-till systems can be even more than just a regular organic system. When you till your soil, it's kind of like opening up the damper in your wood stove. So you're letting air into the soil, and the carbon kind of burns up. The conventional, non-organic no-till systems have used herbicide to clear the field for planting and also for weed control. A lot of the Roundup Ready GMO corn and soybeans is, they do that for a no-till system, so they can nuke it with Roundup, plant their corn or soybeans, and then nuke it again when they're to keep the weeds down. So the GMO corn is resistant to that herbicide. there are efforts to do organic no-till, but it's really kind of an emerging and developing thing. And for us, it's been the last 2 years. It's been we've really kind of had to relearn some of our systems because the way we would typically do things is, you plow or till the field to get it ready to plant, and then we use tillage in between. We plant everything so that we can get in between the rows to cultivate to control weeds. So we're really developing almost completely new systems. The crops that we're growing are the same, but we're really coming up with some new systems to to reduce our tillage. So we've got basically two different types of systems that we've worked out. One is an intensive system, and you probably heard some of this from Dan Pratt yesterday. There's people that are doing no-till, organic no-till, that's very much, small scale, hand scale farming, kind of the postage stamp size farms. So we're trying to do this. We've picked out some crops where we're trying to kind of shrink the acreage that we put in these crops. So things like salad mix, carrots, lettuce, things that kind of are well adapted to a more intensive system. We're kind of shrinking the area that we do, trying to get the same amount of production, but out of a smaller area. And that we started last year. And then the second system is a more extensive system where we use a heavy transferred mulch. So transferred mulch is, we grow mulch in one place and move it to another place and make a thick layer. So that we experimented a little bit with it in 2020, but in 2021 we got some new equipment with help from a grant from MDAR, the Mass Department of Agricultural Resources. It's the ACRE grant, which the C is climate. I don't know what ACRE stands for. So this is the intensive system. We use these black silage tarps, and this is used actually in both systems. We use these black silage tarps. We lay them down to kind of kill everything that's there. So in some ways, this is like an organic version of herbicide. It's not quite as quick as Roundup. We have to leave those on for about 3 weeks. We leave that tarp on. And we've actually prepared these beds at the beginning of the season by laying a thick layer of compost down. So that compost really acts as a mulch. And then we're putting that tarp on for about 3 weeks, pulling it off. We're seeding directly into the soil, and you can see this is that yellow thing is the seeder that we use, and you can kind of see where the tarp's been pulled off. It's just brown. So we seed into there, and then like the next section back, you can see there's some salad greens growing. Some of them are covered by remade to keep insects out. So we'll seed it, we'll harvest it, and then we put the tarp right back down after we're done harvesting. In 2020, we had a section like this where we rotated 3 cycles through the field. So we plant salad greens, tarp it, or harvest, tarp it, and then come back about 3 weeks later. And we just kind of rotated around that field. And it worked. So with, as I kind of alluded to, our big worry is about weed control. So in a no-till system, you theoretically have, with less disturbance of the soil, you're going to get less weeds germinating. But then we typically cultivate to control weeds. So it's a trade-off. We're sacrificing our ability to control weeds. but the gains is that with disturbing the soil less, we theoretically get less weeds. So this was a big leap of faith for us to go and do this. And we just, I guess, had heard about enough people doing this kind of thing and having it work that we were ready to take the leap after several years of kind of figuring it out and researching it. So, and this is where people are harvesting that salad mix, and you can see the weeds aren't so bad there. I mean, that's good. We also found that our quality was quite a bit better. The salad mix that we got out of this, we had one point when we had like a tilled field right next to this field, and the salad mix was noticeably kind of crunchier and lusher. So we're definitely seeing some benefits in terms of quality as well. Here's another example of this intensive system from 2020. This is lettuce that we actually transplanted directly into a compost mulch that had been tarped. And I think that this was the second round. So we had planted lettuce there, harvested the lettuce, tarped it, and then planted lettuce again. So one of the ways we're, kind of shrinking our footprint with this intensive season is by doing multiple seedings over the course of the year. And with the salad mix, can you go back? We actually, in this setup, we have 10 rows per bed instead of when we have to cultivate in between, we're doing 5 rows per bed. So in this case, by going around the field 3 times and by planting twice as much per bed, twice as many rows per bed, we're doing this on 1/6 the land that we did before, and at least in theory, getting the same production out of 1/6 of the land. This is one of the developments that we put in 2020 as well. We modified our water wheel transplanter, so you can see the way this works is water comes out of that spigot in the middle and kind of squirts into those big yellow wheels. And as the tractor drives, those spikes punch a hole in the ground that someone's sitting behind this thing and they can stick the plant into the ground as the tractor moves along. We've got, a flat of a bunch of plants that they're planting into the ground. We modified this. I don't know how well you can see, but there's a big long spike that's bolted onto the end of the regular spike. So this allows us to kind of punch through the mulch. It's just a sharper, pointier thing that punches through the mulch. And we used it in the intensive system in that lettuce field that you saw. But then this is Dave, me and Dave this spring. It came really in handy with the more extensive system. So you can see this field behind us. There was a rye cover crop there. We mowed the rye, and then we mowed more rye from somewhere else and spread it on here. And then we used that spiky transplanter, and we were able to drive right in and plant directly into that mulch. We definitely, with this system, had a big learning curve this year. We figured things out like that spiky transplanter, it makes a hole, but if it's like a fluffy tilled soil, you make a hole that's like a little muddy hole that you just stick the plant in there, and then that, as the mud kind of dries, it forms around the plant. In the no-till fields, it was more like just a hole that was full of water, and then if you just put the plant in there, then the water dries up, then you've got like a plant in a hole. You don't have a plant that's in the soil. So we figured out, first of all, and some of the mulch would actually get down in that hole as well. So we had to kind of pull the mulch aside and then close the hole. So we had to drive the tractor a little bit slower. yeah, there's a lot of learning that went on with the system this year. The timing of the mulch harvest is really important. And with a lot of our tomatoes and peppers and eggplants, the warm season crops, summer squash and cucumbers, we're wanting to plant, early and mid-May, and the rye isn't really quite big enough by then. So and part of that means that when you mow it, it doesn't necessarily die. So we in this field we mowed rye and then we put more rye mulch on top, and then the rye started growing back, which was a little bit of a problem. But we were able to use weed mat as a backup. I think I've got a picture later on of what the weed mat looks like. So this is a video. This is a video of the equipment that we got with that that MDAR grant and how we use it to spread mulch. So I'll leave it to YouTube if this works.
Miracle.
So this is the it's called flex and flow mower. There's a hopper in there. And here they just going and dumping it right into a manure spreader.
All the equipment in the grant was for the purpose of moving to no-till and other like these newer forms of farming. Is that the idea?
And this is spreading the manure or spreading the mulch. So one of the things we learned, like that's a pretty heavy layer, but we actually need to have a thicker layer. And then this is that spiky transplanter. We're just driving it dry, but there's seats behind it that people sit on to transplant into. Now I'm on some weird YouTube page. How do I get past this? Okay, here we go. Uh-oh. All right, so yeah, so a significant learning curve. We need to plant mulch. This is, you can see this field, this summer squash actually turned out pretty well. This was the same field that we saw me and Dave standing in front of. You can see this black material is the weed mat that we use to get some weed control in between the rows. And over to the left, you can see it's kind of grayish green. That's rye that's growing back in the peppers. So we were able to put down some weed mat and got a half decent pepper crop out, but it wasn't the best. So with our need to plant earlier, we're going to use more. We're actually putting a lot more fields into oats and peas rather than rye. So and we're doing that now. This is kind of getting to the end of when you can plant oats and peas. So oats and peas will grow in the fall, and they'll grow, actually still keep putting on growth into December. And then when it gets real cold, they die. So we'll have kind of a standing mulch and a dead cover crop. And then we'll apply more mulch on the top of that, but we hopefully won't have the issues that we did with the rye growing back. And then our later crops will plant into rye, using the weed mat as a backup. And I think next year we'll be a little more prepared to go ahead and do that, to put the weed mat in. So yeah, so that's my presentation. I don't know if you guys have any questions you want to ask.
I might suggest actually, since we are still kind of behind schedule, that maybe since nothing seems to be pressing right now, hold the questions for a little while later so that we can get to read. Is everybody okay with that?
do see a question in the chat.
Oh, is there?
Yeah.
Let me see. I don't have
From
that.
Amelia, do you worry about killing off the macro and microbiota in the soil with the black tarps? I think so. We're putting those on for a relatively short period of time, and what happens when we do that is the plants die, and that feeds the microbes. So they're gonna have something to eat, and then by the time we're pulling the tarp off, hopefully they haven't run out of food. And then compaction with the tarps. That is a concern. It does seem like it compacts a little bit. We're actually we're wondering about improvements in water infiltration or retention with the no-till system. Yes, we have, and we're hoping to see it more over time. One of the things that research shows is that you tend to see more compaction issues in the early part of a no-till transition, and then as your soil gets and your microbes kind of get used to it, and there's a transition time where you have more compaction, and then it gets to be less as you get into the system more. And we're actually part of a grant with NOFA Massachusetts where they're measuring compaction and water infiltration. And that, yep. Does that answer your question, Amelia? All right. Yeah, it's 1 o'clock.
Yep, she said yes. Okay. And I'm sorry for overlooking your question, Amelia. So how about if we move on now? And thank you very much.
Thanks for having me,
Jeremy. Pardon me? Oh, yeah, absolutely. That was very interesting. Yeah.
And I have to head out myself. So,
okay.
So thanks. I hope the rest of your summit is productive.